أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي ابن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. وأما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله. عزم الله أجورنا وأجوركم. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the 9th night of Nabi Akram Islamic Center's Muharram program for 2021. To begin tonight's program, I will call upon Brother Sayyid Ali Gardizi to enlighten our hearts with verses of the Holy Quran. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. الله أكبر، الله أكبر ولله الحمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق. خلق من ماء دافق يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب إنه على رجعه لقادر يوم تبلى السرائر فما له من قوة ولا ناصر. والسماء ذات الرجع والأرض ذات الصدع إنه لقول قول فصل وما هو بالهزل إنهم يكيدون كيدا وأكيد كيدا فمهل الكافرين أمهلهم رويدا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much, Brother Gardizi, for that beautiful recitation. May Allah bless you both in this life and the next, inshallah. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, just a quick reminder to everyone to send in your questions. Please use vivox.app, and the link to join the meeting will be on your screens throughout the program, inshallah. In the last few nights, the shuyukh have been discussing the companions of Imam Hussein. And the personality for tonight is Abul Fazl al-Abbas, who during Karbala became an epitome of loyalty and brotherhood. And I guess the only appropriate topic to link with tonight when speaking about Abul Fazl al-Abbas is brotherhood. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our highly esteemed speakers, His Eminence Sheikh Hamid Waqar, Sheikh Muhammad Dahaini, and Sheikh Ali Safdari. Salla ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبا القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Alhamdulillah, as always, it's an honor and a privilege to be here amongst you, with Sheikh Ali, Sheikh Mohammed. Alhamdulillah, as always, it's a pleasure, and with everyone listening, wherever you are in the world. To speak about Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam is difficult, but one of the issues that we have, because I'm not going to talk about Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam in Karbala. Inshallah, at the end of the lecture, Sheikh Muhammad Dahaini and then Brother Abbas Verji will be recounting those stories. But during his life, we don't have much information about his life before Karbala, right? And there's plenty of differences of opinion about, for instance, when he was born, and various aspects of his life due to the lack of information that we have. The majority of information and books that were written about him started in the 14th century Qamari, which was, over 1,000 years after his Shahada. What we do know, his father was Imam Ali alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and his mother was Fatima bint Huzam, al-Banin. It's been recorded in history that Imam Ali alayhi salam requested Aqil to help him find a wife who would bear brave sons, and Aqil suggests al-Banin. Now, the outcome of this marriage was 4 brave sons, all of whom became shaheed in Karbala. One of the times that he was mentioned before Karbala was his presence in the Battle of Siffin. So he was in Malik al-Ashtar's command, and he actually attacked towards the Furat, towards the river, and was able to secure water for Imam Ali alayhi salam's army, according to a source that I was reading, which I'm sure when he was in Karbala trying to get the water, that probably crossed his mind, these 2 events. Now, it was also recorded, and Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam was young at the time, so it's been mentioned that he was in his 30s in Karbala, and Siffin was at least 20 years before that, probably a little bit more than 20 years before that. So Hazrat Abbas should have been a young teenager at that point. And it's been recorded that he fought and he killed an enemy soldier by the name of Ibn Shafa, who is known amongst the Damascus army to be as strong as 1,000 men. So I'm sure that helped to create this this reputation that Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam had. And I'm sure when people faced him in battle, you know, they knew who he was. Now, one of the aspects of Imam or of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam is brotherhood. And although, as Sheikh Ali mentioned in a discussion we just had, he probably didn't, you know, treat his brother Imam Hussein alayhi salam necessarily as brothers normally do. He was half his age. The Imam had such a high position. He was the Imam, and Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam recognized that. But still, there was this reverence and this relationship that they had, this strong, strong relationship. And when I hear Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, I'm reminded of brotherhood. Now, what I want to do is just mention a couple hadith and then one verse of Quran, and inshallah we'll try to unpack that verse of Quran and speak a little bit about it. So Imam Ali alayhi salam is recorded to have said, Akhal ikhwan fillah, be brotherly to your brother in Islam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is quoted to have said, a believer is the brother of a believer. They are like a body where if one part is in pain, the whole body aches. Their souls are from a single soul, and the connection of a believer's soul to Allah is stronger than the rays of the sun to the sun itself. I love that tradition. Now, finally, the verse of Quran that has been mentioned many times in lectures, written many times in books, and I'm sure you've all heard this verse many times in your lives. Allah states, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Verily, the believers are brothers. And inshallah, I know Sheikh Ali Saftari wanted to unpack that verse a little bit, so I'll let him go, and inshallah we'll hear what he has to say here.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم السلام عليكم جميعا إن شاء الله. Just before we get into verse 10 of Surah Hujurat, the 49th chapter of the Holy Quran, one detail that is often not mentioned in recounting the story of Abbas alayhi salam when he went to bring water for the tents of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is that he in fact went with all of his brothers, you know, the brothers that you just mentioned, the four brothers, or that they were in total, I believe there were four of them. I think it was Uthman, Ja'far, and Abbas, and I forgot the other one. I know there's Uthman, and I'm a bit dubious on the Ja'far, and I forgot the other one altogether. But these were once again the sons of Imam Ali, and they were brave sons of Imam Ali, and they all attacked to bring water for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and his thirsty children, and they were all martyred in that attempt. So just bearing that in mind, where sometimes you hear some exaggerated stories where Abbas alayhi salam attacked on his own and managed to wipe out 5,000 people, things like that. But let's talk about the verse now. This is a verse that on first encounter, there might be nothing to talk about it. You're like, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. But once we, inshallah, go through this discussion, you see how many facets one can uncover from this one three-worded sentence. The verse essentially reads, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. To translate that literally, it doesn't just mean that believers are brothers of one another. Of course, when it says believers are brothers, it extends to believing women being sisters of one another as well. But as you know, the Quran has predominantly used the male pronoun because that's the way of the Arabic language in general. When they want to refer to something in plural, the way of the Arabic language is to use the male pronoun. So there is no relevance the male gender has here, no superiority that the male gender has here in the content of this verse and in the Quran in general. Nonetheless, what I want to pay attention to in the beginning is the term innama. As anyone who is familiar with Arabic, when innama is used in a sentence, it means only and only. Well, yes, that nothing else. So if I had to translate this, I said that's so bad. Innama al-mu'minuna ikhwa means the believers are nothing but brothers of each other. So if you want to make something exclusive and say this thing is only and only that thing and nothing else, then you would use the word innama in the beginning of the sentence. Now, why is that important? Well, in the beginning, you might be asking yourself, well, surely there are other relationships and other relations in the Islamic community. We have people who are mothers of each other, or mothers of a child. We have a hakim, a ruler. We have an imam. We have all these other kinds of relationships that are going on. So when Allah says the believers are only brothers of each other, does that mean there are no other relations and relationships in the Muslim community? Sheikh Hamid is reminding me that some scholars don't have that opinion on innama. That's true, but predominantly most scholars have this opinion that innama is used to explain the exclusivity of something. Okay, but even if we accept that innama means there is an exclusive relationship between the only relationship that we are to find amongst the believers, what this means is that the base relationship, the minimum relationship that members of an Islamic community are to have with one another is brotherhood. If anything comes on top of that, then there is just added responsibility, not less responsibility. So whatever you define as brotherhood, whatever set of responsibilities and duties that we define between members of the Islamic community, if you have another relationship with that person, for example, that person is your father, that person is your mother, that person is your teacher, that person is the marja' taqlid, that person is the imam, on top of that basic relationship of brotherhood, we add more rights and responsibilities for them. The second point is, the verse is essentially, as I was hinting with my words here, explaining that the governing dynamic between members of a Muslim community is one of brotherhood. Now, once again, you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, so what? You would expect that, right? It's nothing too fundamentally different to what we've always heard. But the relevance of this concept and the importance of this concept becomes more apparent for us when we look at other communities, when we look at other ways of life, other ways in which humans govern and organize themselves. The best example of which we could use is our way of life in the West. What is the first notion? What is the first ideal that comes to mind when you think about the governing dynamic between members of society? It's probably two things, right? Most Western countries run on two things. They're called liberal democracies. Majority of them are liberal democracies, which means there is a component of freedom and there is a component of equality. So, of course, both of these are heavily loaded words, and we're not going to touch on freedom tonight. We want to focus more on equality, because equality seems to be an ideal, and it is definitely an ideal in Western societies, and it is a lovely ideal, and it is an ideal that we wish more of it actually was prevalent in our Muslim communities. But the importance that is given to this ideal, to this aspect, is in the sense that it governs the relationship between people. If you read the document for the Declaration of Human Rights, one of the first few clauses is that all humans were created equal. We should have equality in terms of opportunity, equality in terms of so many different aspects that I don't want to necessarily mention here. So equality is an important concept. Now, if you go back to the verse and ask yourself, well, Islam is saying the minimum way, the minimum mechanism through which members of a Muslim community should be interacting with one another is one of brotherhood. Put that on one side, and then you come and look at liberal democracies around the world, Australia being included, and you see the baseline, the fundamental relationship that governs people's behavior with one another is one of equality. Now you can potentially see what there could be in terms of differences between these two societies. I'll make a disclaimer here. When we are comparing these two societies, we don't mean that Muslim communities are practicing brotherhood. In fact, what it looks like is that, as I was mentioning earlier, some of our Muslim communities here in Australia, or even in other parts of the world, are potentially, not potentially, for sure, are not even practicing equality, let alone brotherhood, which is, as we will see in this discussion, a more noble ideal than equality. So we're just looking at it in terms of theory, what Islam presents as a way of life and what other systems of modern systems provide as a way of life and how people should interact with one another. So, by the way, Sheikh Muhammad and Sheikh Ahmed, please jump in whenever you feel like it. What comes to mind, I think, between the difference between brotherhood and equality, even from the words itself, it seems like when you think of brotherhood, you're thinking outside of yourself. You're looking at a relationship that exists outside of you, a person that is not you, but it is connected to you, but is not you. So when I say there's a relationship of brotherhood, I'm already assuming that there is someone outside. So my look, my care, my compassion, what concerns me is outside of me. But what it appears, right, when we think of equality, the more predominant idea that comes to our mind, the preponderant idea, if you like, that comes to our mind, is that I should have equal amount of rights with someone else. Yes, there is the idea that we all should be equal, but it looks like, and as history has actually shown, that the idea of equality, the concept of equality, carries more a focus on the self, that I have equal rights, whereas the idea of brotherhood focuses more on the outside, where you care about the person that is classified as your brother. To make that a bit clear, I know this could be debated. To make that a bit clear, when I say, for example, I am Sheikh Hamid's equal, what I'm implying is that, of course, I'm not his equal. He's Taj Ra'si. He's way above me. What I'm implying,
Relax.
what I'm implying here is that I share everything in the sense that equality matters as he does. So it's about me, right? I'm only using Sheikh Hamid as a point of reference. I am equal to Sheikh Hamid. I am saying I carry everything Sheikh Hamid has. So I'm only using as a point of comparison, as a point of reference. But imagine I told you that I am Sheikh Hamid's brother. So yes, he is a point of reference as well, but he's not only a point of reference, but you're saying there is a connection. Can you guys hear my WhatsApp messages? Should I? Okay, I need to put this on mute, sorry.
It's very interesting, Sheikh Ali. It's very interesting the way that Islam, firstly, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa ujurakum. Just to give you a breather real quick before we get to the next point, but the fact that Islam, you know, on many different occasions and through the words of Amir Mu'minin alayhi salam in high political authority, in high positions, and the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we mentioned yesterday an aspect of brotherhood that was mentioned even in the past couple of nights. A couple of times we've spoken about brotherhood just because of how dominant it is and how available it is theoretically and practically in Islam as part of our belief system. But you know, the question is, Sheikh Ali and Sheikh Hamid, of course, today in today's society, in today's age, what is the perception we have on brotherhood versus the actual theoretical perception that Islam brings forward on brotherhood? So right now, when I say I have a brother called, if I say Sheikh Ali is my brother, what do I really mean by that in today's meaning versus what Islam wants me to be benefiting from brotherhood and whatnot?
Right.
Interesting. I was thinking about what you were saying too, Ali. The difference between brotherhood and equality. I think it's a very interesting topic there. And when you first mentioned that brotherhood is between two people, it's something external to yourself, whereas equality is something where you're saying, I should be treated as equal, right? It's interesting that that's not what popped into my mind, right? In my mind, I understand, like with brotherhood, definitely, there's two people in this equation, 100%. And when I see brotherhood, I agree with you that brotherhood is more me treating my brother correctly, as Sheikh Mohammed Dani pointed to. We have to describe what treating him correctly is. But when I look at equality, it's interesting because when you look at equality, a lot of times it's a minority group who's asking for rights, who is being mistreated in society. Whereas I'm coming from the white male perspective, there's, usually it's we are having to treat people with equality because unfortunately white males don't do that as much as they should. But like brotherhood does have two aspects. You could think that, yep, brotherhood is not only me treating others brotherly, but me being treated like a brother. But you're right, it's not that's not what pops into mind when you think of the word, right? So I think that is an interesting distinction. And after I mulled it over for a minute and thought about it, I fell into agreement with you. But I think it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about your perspective on those two. And I want to get into what it means from an Islamic perspective to be a brother, because that could be like an airy-fairy term if we don't kind of really look into that and examine it as well.
To boil it down, why I'm giving this small linguistic introduction in the beginning is to ease ourselves into this idea that I'm about to introduce. And the main idea is brotherhood. It surrounds the idea of responsibility. When I say someone is my brother, there is an idea of responsibility in this connection that you have made. Whereas I feel what we have come, although this might not be the dictionary meaning of equality, when the meaning of equality is understood, you're right, it depends on the denomination you belong to, but generally speaking, at least from the perspective I feel that it's used in popular culture, the idea of equality is the idea of entitlement. If it's about women equality, is that women are entitled to certain sort of rights that men already have. If it's about Black equality, it's because they are lacking in certain areas, therefore they are entitled to this idea. If it's about, the current discussions about LGBTQT, then it's the same idea. Well, they are entitled to certain rights that they are not being given. They are not being treated equally. Although I feel like it's a hyperbole for what a right should be, and I want to touch on that a bit later on. But nonetheless, I feel that's the biggest distinction, that when you speak of brotherhood, you are speaking of responsibility, right? And that's why I said it's external, because when you have responsibility towards people, it becomes external. But when it's about entitlement, it's about me. In another way, to word it differently, equality is a very minimalistic ideal from a Muslim utopia, from Islamic utopia. It's as if God is saying, yeah, like there's nothing like equality is a must-have, but look, I've got something at a much higher, different level. I'm not only saying that you guys should be equal, I'm saying go to the maximum, that the basic factor that governs society and its members should be one of brotherhood, not just equality. So when you put it into that perspective, when Allah is putting responsibility on people, as opposed to catering for that urge to always look for entitlements. I think it creates a difference in attitude, in just a different way, and like, it has manifested. Like now, it's all at the level of theory, right? But now look at how it's manifested in the West. I feel since maybe the beginning of the first right movements that began in the West. You have your early women rights movement from early 1900s, and then into 1950s, 1960s, you got the black rights, the gay rights, and so on and so forth, right? Now, for example, women rights, yes, sure, there have been elements from a Western woman's perspective, they definitely deserve to have, and they fought for it and they got it, right? But I feel that this has created a culture in the West that the point of focus, the default mode of interacting with people is one of entitlement. Like it's become a trend, a cultural mindset that we should always be looking for our rights. And this is subconsciously and actually very innocently taught to us from a very young age, in the sense that we're always taught, hey, know your rights with your parents, what your parents can and can't do. Know your rights, when to call the cops. I mentioned this another time as well. Know your rights with your teachers. Your teachers shouldn't be doing this. Make sure you report them. And so on and so forth. This idea of, I told you, we mentioned earlier about always questioning authority. Now, Islam does not say be submissive all the time. Islam does not say be passive all the time. But do you see how the focus is about what you deserve, not about what you should do? And it's become so ridiculous. Like I said, earlier right movements had something to fight for. Like they didn't have, for example, equal pay, if you want to say. They were not given certain basic rights, so on and so forth. Then they actually fought for them. But since that culture has been bred into our generation, we still want to fight for something. We're fantasizing about this idea of entitlement at every stage of our life, that the new generation, I feel like they ran out of things to fight for. So what did they come up with? You have to use the right pronoun when you refer to me. I feel like essentially that's where like the current generation of activists, those especially on the far left, are looking for the most random of things. Like they're creating entitlements for themselves because this has been injected into them that you should always be looking for entitlements. And that's why you have movements like people asking for the people imposing limitations on how others should address them, imposing limitations on other people's speech, right? That's how ridiculous it has become. And that's all because a culture of entitlement has been bred into from us from a very young age. Now compare that to a culture of responsibility. Imagine, and I want you to bring some example of what it means to be someone's brother, right? Imagine we were raised from the beginning, we were taught our rights. Yeah, these are your rights with respect to your parents, with respect to your teachers, with respect to this institution, with respect to the government. But hey, these are your responsibilities. Go chase your responsibilities. The verse has the first responsibility of a brother, and then I'll pass it on to you to mention other ones. It says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Surely brothers are believers of each other. فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. The first responsibility that Allah establishes for members of a community that He considers to be the perfect community of people is Islah. فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Go and try to reform, try to fix issues of your brothers. And we're in Karbala, we're in Muharram. I mean, how more beautifully does this link to the idea of Imam Hussein uprising to make Islah for all his brothers, if you like, for everyone that's part of that Muslim community. But I know we have a lot of riwayat that are more specific about what we can do for our believing brothers in the Islamic community. So if you could enlighten us on that, that would be nice.
Inshallah. I feel the point that you made way back at the beginning of your talk, where you showed that baseline is brotherhood, and then the other relationships that we have fall over that as well. So brotherhood is like the foundation, and then there's further responsibility depending on other relationships that we might have with people. So, my teacher is my brother, and then he's my teacher. right? And my student is my brother, and then he's my student. And my father is my brother, and then my father, for instance, right? So you have that baseline, and then you have further responsibility in addition to that baseline, which I really think that that's interesting, and that's a nice way to put it. But to describe what that baseline is, I know Sheikh Mohammed Dahani is just waiting to jump in and enlighten us on how the brothers should behave. Because to be like, with all honesty, like looking at the way that Sheikh Mohammed interacts with people, you could see that he really takes brotherhood to heart in his interaction. And it oozes out of him. So I'd love to hear him describe it with words and not just
Yes.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. You're too kind. But honestly, I was really enjoying that. I've never heard this topic be dissected that way. Ahsan, Sheikh Ali.
Sallallahu
Yeah, you're right, Sheikhna. The topic of brotherhood it is very deep to me, just because when you look at the history of our Islamic history, and you find the key characters, like, you know, if even you wanted to go back to the biblical times, in the Prophet's times, you had Harun and Musa alayhi salam, and there was always that, like, brother figure, that, you know, the right hand man, that the person that there was always our role model, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi had Imam Ali alayhi salam. You know, in after the Holy Prophet, Imam Ali had Malik al-Ashtar, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam had Abu Fadl Abbas. The companions all had brothers, but these deep relationships, I've always been fascinated by them, because I feel like they're essential to one's growth, like that type of relationship, you know. And Sheikh Ali, I could not have put it perfectly like you. You know, just don't limit that thought, the concept of brotherhood, to my literal brother. You know, you have to show that brotherhood with your spouse. You know, that deep care, that responsibility that the brothers were mentioning. So, just, you know, before I start getting into my part on brotherhood, let's listen to what the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'm going to take just a couple of minutes of your time and just mention a few rights that the Prophet says that every Muslim has upon his other brother. Okay. Number one, he says the brother, he must forgive his brother's faults. And just to clarify, as Sheikh Ali clarified earlier, but just in case people tuned in a bit later, when we say brother, we don't literally mean male. We're not gender specific here. You know, the Islam or the Arabic language itself predominantly uses the word akh or male context usually. So in this, when we say brother, we're going a bit expanding. But number one, the brother must forgive his brother's faults. He must be kind to his brother during hard times. He must hide his brother's secrets. He must compensate for his brother's faults. He must accept his brother's apologies. He must defend his brother against those who gossip behind his back. He must always advise his brother. He must safeguard his brother's friendship. He must honor his brother's covenant. He must visit his brother when he's sick. He must attend his brother's funeral procession. He must accept his brother's invitations. And, you know, he keeps going, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. The last few, he says, he must welcome his brother's kindness. He must welcome his brother's words. He must accept his brother's swearing. In a sense, if your brother swears at you or gets angry at you or is trying to just pull you on the right path, you must accept it. He must not treat his brother with animosity. He should not leave his brother alone in the face of calamities. And he must like for his brother what he likes for himself, and dislike for his brother what he dislikes for himself. Now, the Holy Prophet mentioned 30. I only mentioned a few of them. But you can see that the type of relationship that's intended between us, between the Muslims, between, you know, and we can even expand it to our equals in humanity, not just brothers in faith, but specifically from our brothers in faith, specifically from those who I hope to call part of my brotherhood, my Islamic brotherhood. The things that you're going to expect, or you should be expecting, is not someone that's going to validate you when you're wrong. You know, like right now, or I know personally, you know, for a long time in my life, I thought the closest brothers to me, the ones that really cared about me, were the ones that were validating me, the ones that were making me feel good about what I'm doing. And the beauty of a brother is that responsibility that Sheikh Ali was mentioning that we have to one another. You know, when you have a hadith like al-mu'minu mir'at akhihi al-mu'min, you know, the Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says that the mu'min, the believer, is the mirror of his believer, of another believer. It's like, for example, when I told you, if I told you, look, you know, look at the wall, and I tell you, explain to me your, you know, speak to me about your facial expression and how clean you are, or, you know, if you have any spots on your face, and you're looking at the wall, you tell me, how am I going to tell you? Like, how am I supposed to know? I have to look in a mirror. If you look in the mirror, that's you seeing your physical reflection. You're seeing your imperfections and the things that you can work on. But when it comes to your spiritual self, when it comes to your akhlaq, when it comes to your akhlaqiyat, your social maturity, and how you act in gatherings, how you act around different people, the things that you say, the way that your maturity in different situations. If no one was there to be my mirror, no one was there to stand in front of me, to tell me my faults, to tell me where I'm wrong, then I'm going to be living a long time in my life just preparing myself for tragedy. Because one day people aren't going to be validating anymore. My friends aren't going to be validating anymore. No one's going to be telling me, hey, Muhammad, what you're doing is wrong. How you're doing it is wrong. You're being disrespectful. You know, you've got this habit that it puts people off. If I don't have a brother that's going to be my reflection, my emotional reflection, my spiritual reflection, if I can't find this in a spouse, if I can't find this in a best friend, you know, that type of responsibility, then it's limiting my potential to grow, you know. And, you know, and you look at another hadith, أخوك من صادقك لا من صدقك. Your brother is the one that tells you the truth, is honest to you, not the one that lies to you and validates you, makes you feel good about yourself. So, you know, looking at this responsibility, and if we all believe that, you know, that's the whole point. This isn't a one-sided thing. If I believe that this is the concept of brotherhood, this is the theory behind it, this is how I should be, and I act accordingly with integrity, with personal integrity, I treat my brother Ali the same way I expect him to treat me, and I want him to treat me. I understand him and listen to him the way he wants to be understood, because I want him to understand me. You know what I mean? If I speak in that manner, if I work in that manner, then my potential for growth is great, because now I'm opening a door with Sheikh Ali to tell me, hey man, your imperfections are so-and-so. Your imperfection, you did so-and-so. You know, in the lecture tonight or in this discussion tonight, you said 1, 2, 3, you shouldn't have said 1, 2, 3, and I know to work off it. And he wouldn't tell me these imperfections unless I acted like a brother in the first place and opened that door. So, you know, when you look at the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, when you look at Al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, and the altruism that he portrayed, that, you know, he portrayed that love for your brother what you love for yourself, a dislike for yourself, a dislike for your brother what you dislike for yourself, on the highest level. You know, when he was able to, you know, stand or sit at the river and able to drink water, and he denied it, and it was justified. Al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam drinking water in that situation was justified. No one was going to say anything. You know, you're in war. It's tough circumstances. You can have a drink of water, but he says no, because his brotherhood has extended far beyond, you know, my brother being around me. It's proper integrity. I want water, but I will not have water because my brother doesn't have water, and I will only have water when my brother has water. And living by it, dying by it, shows the power and the strength of brotherhood, and how you know, just prior to now, I was looking at the hadiths and the narrations and the ayat, and it's never ending when it comes to brotherhood. And subhanallah, making that distinction between brotherhood and equality, I think it's key, because for a long time in my life, I know that I did live that victim mentality. You know, I lived that, you know, waiting for someone and my rights, and, you know, just always making sure that the excuse is ready. But when you're really looking for growth, when you're looking for strength, then it's only within these relationships of brotherhood where you find that potential to grow.
So, just to kind of reiterate what you were just saying now. There's this one tradition that I was reading from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, which I thought was really, really good. It's a tradition from Mu'alla ibn Khanis, who's one of his companions. And just like us, who want to know what it's like to be a good brother, and we read the verse of Quran, innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, and we see all the encouragement that Islam gives to brotherhood. I'm sure the companions wanted to get a good definition of what it is to be a brother. So he asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, what are the rights that a Muslim has over another Muslim? Like how are we supposed to treat one another here? Because we know this is emphasized greatly. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam answers, there's 7 obligatory rights that a believer has over another. If one of them is unfulfilled, he will leave the guardianship and obedience of Allah. Allah will not help such a person. So if you don't fulfill these basic foundational points of brotherhood that go beyond the equality that Sheikh Ali was mentioning, then we could put ourselves in a position, auzubillah, that Allah won't help us. So now that gets pretty, it was a pretty easy question. There was nothing to that question, he just wanted a little list, but now it became way more serious, right? So then he asked, okay, what are these rights? Tell me now. I need to know so I know I'm fulfilling them, basically. I don't want to put myself in such a dangerous position. The Imam gives a very interesting response here. He says, "Oh Mu'alla, I'm afraid that you'll not fulfill them. I'm afraid that you will know them, but you will not act in accordance to them." The Imam didn't even want to tell him. He didn't want to tell him what they were. He's not put in that place of danger. But Mu'alla insisted. He said, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah." And the Imam said, "All right, I'll tell you." And then a lot of them are interesting because they're obviously Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and the Prophet have the same message. So some of them will be repeated. But he says these 7 rights. First, the easiest of these rights is that you should want for him that which you want for yourself and hate for him that which you hate for yourself, which was the last one that you mentioned, right? So that one's a very important one. We see that, sometimes people become envious of one another, and when someone advances in life, gets a promotion, is victorious, wins something, achieves something, then we say, "Oh, why wasn't it me? Like I should get something." Like we're not happy in celebrating it. We're thinking of ourselves and why he has it and I don't. And then that's the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be. So if something, if you get invited to speak at, the biggest center for Muharram, I should be like, great, alhamdulillah, let's celebrate that. That's a great thing. What an opportunity you have. And no one invited me. Alhamdulillah, that's fine. I'm happy for you. You know what I mean? But a lot of times we see that envy kind of seeps into our relationship. So that's the first one. Second one, the second right is that you should distance yourself from his anger and seek his satisfaction. Try to make him happy, right? If we're going to go out to a restaurant and I know you want to go to that restaurant, let's go there. You know what I mean? Let's try to do things that please him, not major decisions. I'm not going to marry someone because they'll make you happy, right? I'm not going to go to this career path because it'll make you happy, but I'm going to do my best to try to make you happy. Like, I don't want to make you upset. I'm not going to ridicule you. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to annoy you for no reason at all, but I'm going to try to make you happy, inshallah. And there's a tradition from Imam Musa Qadim alayhi salam. He who makes a Muslim believer happy has initially pleased Allah, secondly pleased the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and thirdly pleased us, the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So it's a big thing. All right, third one. You should aid him with your property, tongue, hands, and feet. And when you think of Abu Fadl Abbas, I think that's the definition of that statement there, right? Fourth one, you should be his eyes and his guide. So the mirror, as you were saying, Sheikhna. So we should not only try to make him happy and just please him always, but part of that is trying to help him improve and grow in his relationship with Allah and improve in life in general, right? Fifth right is that you should not be full while he's hungry. You should not be thirsty, or you should not quench your thirst when he's thirsty, and you should not be clothed when he's unclothed. And the quenching the thirst bit, when you think of Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, that one right there again is, the living example of that.
It's like Imam Sadiq alayhi salam had Abu Fadl Abbas there, and he was making these rules. He was writing these rules.
6-1. 6-1. If you have a servant and he does not, you should send your servant to wash his clothes, cook his food, and make his bed. So Ali, I'll be waiting for that one, inshallah. 7th one is that you should treat him well, accept his invitations, visit him when sick, attend his funeral, take care of his needs when you realize he has one without making him ask. And that's a big one, right? There's a lot of, like, this one has a few of them embedded into one. Accepting his invitations is big, right? A lot of times someone might say, come, let's go to a coffee shop, right? You might not be bothered. You're lying down on your couch after work, or, you've been studying all day and you're tired, or you just can't be bothered to go out. And you say, let's leave it for another day, right? Maybe that brother had a difficult day. Maybe something happened and he just needs some company right now. He just needs someone to talk to. And this was an opportunity to help, but you rejected it, right? Obviously, you have to have balance. You can't go out every night, but you got, family responsibilities. You have other responsibilities, but you should definitely make an effort to accept his invitations. Visit when sick. Nowadays, it's so easy. You can make a phone call. You could, just the fact that that this person cares for you. I think that's the purpose there, right? You don't have to, you might live far away from him. Yeah.
You can't visit COVID patients.
True, but you could call them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you can still contact them.
Yeah.
And taking care of his needs when he when you know what they are, without making him ask. And the only way to do that is to be a part of his life, right? If I see you once in a blue moon, I don't know what you need in life, right?
No.
I have to be intimately involved in your life to be able to understand when you need something. And this is a type of relationship that Islam wants from everybody, right? And obviously in huge cities, you can't have this relationship with every single person. That's just not possible. But in our circles, we definitely can improve in our relationships. Like, I know myself, I know, like, there's a lot of brothers in the community who are listening now, who are, from the Nabi Akram community, that I love with all my heart, but we don't spend as much time together. We're not as close as we could be. And, it's my shortcoming. Inshallah, we could work on that. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam concludes, and he says, when you perform these actions, you will connect your friendship to him, and he will connect his friendship to you. And that's when the bonds of true friendship are strengthened. And I think that's when that verse of the Quran, Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, will be actualized, when we're actually following these rights, and not following them as in like boxes to check, but following them out of the sincerity of our heart, and because we want to interact this way with each other.
Santam Sheikh, there's something about the words of Ahlul Bayt. I could be here doing 100 intellectual gymnastics, explaining this and that, but you just hear their words and it just sits in your heart. As the hadith says, when your hearts are like iron, like metals, they become rusty, and if you want to remove the rust, then listen to our words and listen to the Quran. So going back to listening, going back to the Quran, trying to incorporate the Quran more on this topic, another verse that's comes to mind as well is Surah Al Imran, verse 103. There are a few very nice key points in this verse about brotherhood as well. So it begins, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. So all of you cling to the rope of Allah collectively and do not divide. وَاذْكُرُوا, this is where it gets very nice. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ, and remember the blessing of God that has been bestowed to you. What was this blessing? إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً, when you were enemies of one another, فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ, and he brought you together, he brought your hearts together, he connected your hearts together. فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا, and with the glory of your Lord, with the blessings of your Lord, with the mercy of your Lord, only through that you became believers and brothers. And I want to come back to all of these points. There's a few nice points here. وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَى حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ, meanwhile, you were at the edge of a pit of fire. Essentially, just imagine yourself just about to fall into fire. فَأَنْقَذَكُمْ مِنْهَا, and Allah saved you from the edge of the pit of fire. Now, what does this verse tell us? Essentially, it begins to tell us that brotherhood in its truest sense, and just look at the descriptions Sheikh Muhammad and Sheikh Ahmed outline for us, these obligations we have towards one another is not easy sometimes. Let's not fool ourselves. Some of them are very difficult and we have to put effort. And so this verse says, فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا, it is through the kindness of your Lord that you became brothers. So it's ultimately something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us. So we have to just as well try to make the effort in performing those obligations, which at times are difficult. We should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to do those things. Why? Because things like Shaykh Ahmed mentioned, jealousy get in the way, envy and get in the way. You can't see someone performing well, getting a promotion. And sometimes it's just not easy to act responsibly. Like I have problems acting responsibly for my own life. Like I have to get up and do the stuff I have to do to make sure that I don't fall into that pit of fire, that my life is not a pit of fire. I'm not even talking about the akhirah. To act responsibly for myself is difficult. Like my nafs does not allow me to do that. It wants me to be lazy. Now, not only that, it wants me to act responsibly for someone else. That's a huge ask for a sick nafs like I have. So we have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. The other point from this verse is وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَى حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ, you were at the edge of a pit of fire, and with brotherhood you were saved. What is the verse saying? Is that we will be at the edge, at the boundary of social destruction if we do not mandate these things amongst us. That our Muslim community will eventually evaporate. There will be nothing left of it in a few generations if somehow we don't keep these ties together. And this touches back on our earlier topic of teamwork. Once again, for whatever the reason is, because of the way the core of Western thought is individualism, it's been taught to us from young age to, you can do it, you're going to be on top of the world, it's you. Just be quiet, it's us. Why we're not fed that narrative, right? Everything has to be a one-man show. If I want to be, even in the most noble of pursuits, the pursuit of Islam, the pursuit of doing work fi sabilillah, it has to be a one-man show. But this is saying you will be at the boundary of social destruction if there is no teamwork, if there is no brotherhood. And finally, I think to build on that earlier point about it's a relationship that Allah puts in our hearts. You know what that means? That means that if Allah is building that relationship, this relationship is eternal. Every other relationship has a contingency. If I am married, there's a contingency of this relationship providing me what I need. And the day that I don't see what I have, I don't get what I want, then this contingency fails and see you later. I'm friends with someone on the basis of work, on the basis of study, on the basis of some contingency that some benefit I receive, right? Once that goes away, so does the relationship, even in this world. Now, let's assume in this world, you guys were very nice to each other. What does Allah say about the best of relationships in the akhirah? يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. The day in which a person runs from his father, runs from his friends, runs from his mother. Everyone is running away from each other. All relationships dissipate in Yawm al-Qiyamah, except, of course, relationships, any relationship that is, right? Any relationship whose contingency is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whose basis is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if there is a friendship, that verse يا ليتني لم أتخذ فلانا خليلا. Woe be unto me. I wish I had not taken this such and such person as a friend, because that friendship wasn't built on the basis of Allah. The contingency wasn't Allah. Allah is not a contingency though. Allah is everlasting. Allah is always there. So Allah is saying, if you ask me and you take on the effort for there to be this brotherhood amongst you, not only will this brotherhood be for this life, but it will persist into a day where everyone is running away from each other. I thought that verse is just phenomenal.
Beautiful points, mashallah. Sheikh Tahani, a question came up. Why can't, and you touched upon this earlier when you were talking, so maybe unpacking it a little bit more. Why can't we see non-Muslim people as our brothers? We are all human. What is our responsibility over our brothers? And there's another comment that the people love you sheikhs as well, and alhamdulillah, we all love them too. But so why can't we see non-Muslim people as our brothers? And I know you touched upon that, saying that we can, but
so of course we can. Anyone can be your brother. Everyone should be your brother. There should be, at the very least, we are all equal. We all share humanity and this essence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has given us. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, which we all share, this sense of divinity that we all share. So I think brotherhood, it's not, I think there's levels of brotherhood. I think that's the best way to put it. The best way is the highest level of brotherhood that you can attain must be partnered with Islam, because you're talking about a spiritual connection that supersedes the physical world and the materialistic world. You're talking about things that aren't limited to this time and space. So when you have an akh fillah, a brother in God, a brother that's the bond between you and I, or him and I, the rope between him and I is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the sense of responsibility you feel you have towards him and he has towards you is much greater than, any other friend. So the higher my relation, or the deeper relationship I have with the person in front of me, it can be, Sheikh Hamid, you mentioned this, like there are many friends that we have in mosque, from our community that we haven't seen in a long time, since this lockdown. And from these different groups that we all have, I think we would have been communicating with some of them. And from these groups that we're communicating with, there are some that would speak more frequently. So we already know, like within ourselves innately, that there are people that, let me just mention, there's a few ahadith. Let me mention these ahadith just to. So before I mention this hadith, there's actually in Imam Ali alayhi salam, and I mentioned this earlier, but Sheikh Ali just gave me the heads up for this one. We mentioned this earlier, that Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he was the governor and the Khalif, or the ruler, or the, why am I blanking out, Sheikh Hamid? Why am I blanking out? It's the Laylat al-Ashir. Laylat al-Ashir. Sheikh Hamid's Laylat al-Ashir. Abu Fadl Abbas has taken me. He's taking my thoughts. He's taking my focus. So when Imam Ali alayhi salam was the Khalifa, he sent a message with Malik, and it's still till today. This letter that he had sent to Malik is put. I think it's mentioned that it's put in the United Nations, if I'm not mistaken. Where in this letter he states, "O Malik, when you're dealing with these people on my behalf as a governor, when you're dealing with people," he says, "remember, there's people are of two types. They're either your brother in religion, or they're your equal in humanity. أخٌ لك في الدين أم نذير لك في الخلق." So he's outlining and pinpointing that you do have responsibility to all mankind, not just your Muslim brother, but it just differs the level of responsibility. But Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he mentions the three types of believers actually. He says that, if I can find it, he says that brothers are of three kinds. The first kind is like nourishment that we always need. And the second is like a disease, and they are the foolish ones. And the third kind is like the remedy, and they are the intelligent ones. So it's obvious that within, you know, there's this depth of brotherhood, this relationship you have, that the outcome or the result of this relationship is going to be different according to the type of relationship you have with the person. So whether they're Muslim or not, you know, the only difference is your responsibility towards the other person. Yeah.
Ahsan.
Is there
Sheikh
any other
Ali.
questions? Because I don't have any of the.
No,
Yeah,
there's no more questions.
I was just going to extend more on top of that hadith from Imam Ali. Like, it ties that whole discussion we just had about brotherhood and equality.
Yes.
Imam Ali is saying, if that person is a Muslim, once again, like I said, the relationship between Muslims is the minimum relationship that Allah bestows is supposed to be one of brotherhood, right? And Allah is saying, I want your relationship with your brother in faith to be of a higher quality than your relationship with someone who's not from the same faith. We're not embarrassed to say that. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my nephew's attacking my house. Hopefully someone comes to rescue me. If Allah is saying, you brothers in faith, you have more rights over one another. You are like brothers, like your own flesh, blood brother. But yes, when it comes to those who are not brothers of faith, don't just because now they're not in your faith, they have no rights. No, nadhirun laka fil khalq. You treat them like your equals. Now, I'll make a caveat here. This does not mean that you can't treat those who are not of the same faith as you like they are your brothers. That does not mean that. Allah is saying, look, I'm telling you, or Imam Ali at least saying in this hadith, as a way to govern people, the minimum you should be giving them is from the perspective of equality. You want to treat them more, ya ahlan wa sahlan, go for it. As the Prophet was, inna arsalnaka rahmatan lil alameen. He was a rahmah to everyone. Whoever came across, and yesterday we're talking about Hilf al-Fudul, how he used to put his life in danger for non-Muslims. That discussion last night was all about that, right? But if you are not going to take that initiative to be ever more compassionate towards those who are not from your faith at the same level as you would for those who share that same faith, but don't forget the minimum I require from you is this ideal of humanity, of equality. I think it's just a phenomenal hadith, how it links both ideas together.
Ahsan, mashallah. All right.
People want to see my nephew.
Your nephew.
Awesome.
I don't know if you're doing that or not, but how can we, there's another question that came up. How can we teach our young people to nurture this kind of brotherhood instead of the selfish trend promoted at school?
Nice. Okay. So firstly, I think it's summarized in the action of Al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam out in when he portrayed altruism. Like, we have to learn the importance of really loving the success and loving the success of our brother. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sheikh Ali's nephew took the stage for a minute, but yeah, go for it. Sorry.
The aggressors here.
Okay, so if 1 second, sorry about that. Okay, so if I was sitting with, you know, a bunch of youth right now, and they asked me, okay, how do we build the brotherhood between each other? Okay, the first thing I'll ask them is, okay, how much do you understand each other's needs? 1, how much do you care for each other's needs? And 3, what are you willing to do for each other's needs? Those 3 questions, if someone's able to sincerely answer them with another person, then they can begin working on their brotherhood. When we're able to really care about the success, and we really care about the flourishment of our brother in Islam, or anyone in general, just knowing that this person is going to be happy when they achieve so and so. This person, my friend, is going to, you know, be over the moon when, you know, this happens. If I am going to really act upon that brotherhood, I'm going to be there to, number one, help him reach that, help him or her achieve what they're trying to achieve, and be extremely happy for them on their path, on their way to achieving it, and being passionate with them. And then when they do achieve it, be extremely grateful for them and be happy for them. When you're able to really care about that, really care about the outcomes that my brothers have, the outcomes that they're trying to aspire to, then, you know, they're stepping stones. They're stepping stones to, but I think this all comes down to an earlier topic that we had a couple of nights ago about working on oneself, you know, working on oneself and the potential for ourselves to grow, understanding that I am put on this earth to reach a certain level of perfection, to reach a certain level of, unlock a certain level of greatness within myself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me the capabilities to. And I can't do this alone. And, you know, if tonight's taught us anything, it's that Islam stresses the point that إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. It's not إِيَّاكَ أَعْبُدُ. It's not me. And, you know, there are some, even jurisprudentially, there's some ahkam that reinforces this. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, shuyukhna al-'idham, that if you're at home and there's salat jama'ah being prayed in the masjid next door to you, you're not even allowed to pray at home whilst that jama'ah is being run. Is that correct? That to enforce the brotherhood, or to enforce the importance of being together in society, being with your brothers, and not being this whole individualism, that's the image of individualism that we've been taught or sold since we're young, of it's all about me, it's all about my success, it's all about my progress, it's all about how I feel, it's all about my rights. You know, when you search for the growth of your brother,
but not it wouldn't be, you know, it wouldn't invalidate the prayer, but there'd be karaha there.
No,
yeah.
Karaha. So yeah, so the point is that Islam speaks about these little things. Like it mentions it pinpoints that, you know, you must work on this brotherhood. You must work on, and Sheikhna, think about Hajj. Think about the glory of this ritual, this Islamic ritual that is created to make us all, or remind us all, of our equality and our brotherhood. That it's done in a very social gathering. We're all meant to be doing it together. It's not, I can't go and do Hajj and forget there's so many things I have to take into consideration. It's all about a time of me connecting with my brothers and really caring about them. So
I think
I can't say if there's any questions, so you're gonna have to cut me off, or else. Yeah.
Just to kind of reiterate that, the question about how to teach it to children, right, as opposed to what they learn.
I feel like I strayed off that question a bit. Yeah, sorry.
No. Just, I feel that one of the important aspects is what's it called, modeling, right? And modeling, meaning when I treat my brothers in Islam in a certain way, and maybe my children are asking, and I say, look, that's my brother. I'm gonna, you know, I have to help my brother. This is my brother in Islam, and just keep pounding that into them, right? That through example, I think they learn a lot more about social interaction than you sitting there explaining it to them. You know what I mean? Like 100%. When you could explain, you know, you should treat your wife this way, but then they see you treating your wife a different way. I think they learn that.
Yeah, you know, Sheikhna, on that, actually, you know, just the fact that you mentioned that real quickly, you know, when we started the Scouts Academy, and we started to think about how we're going to teach the youth leadership and brotherhood and all this other stuff, we sat down and we tried to think about different ideas or different classes or different workshops. And then we came up with a very simple concept. We said, look what we're going to do. We're going to create a camp, and we're not going to teach them about brotherhood, but the leaders of this camp have to portray the highest level of brotherhood. But what we're going to teach them is how to have fun. We're going to show them how to have fun, but with leaders that have so much respect for each other, that have so much care for each other, that put their almost bow down their heads towards another and listen to what each is saying, and we don't backtrack each other's words. We don't, you know, show. Once the students saw this, they started to implement a high level of brotherhood that, you know, even till today, it's been months and they still have this connection. So you're 100% Sheikhna. You're right. If you're not taught as a child the importance of this connection and this the depth of this relationship, then you're gonna take advantage of it, and you're gonna be taught and you're gonna be digesting what you're being taught in school, which is the concept of equality that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So just one little point. When I mentioned karaha, actually I kind of maybe jumped the gun there, but you were talking about when prayer is happening in a masjid and you are close to that masjid. I think it's within a 40 house level or whatever. Yeah. Then as the Jama'ah prayer is occurring at that moment, what's the ruling on you praying individually at your home? I mentioned that, like, the question was whether the prayer is valid. The prayer is definitely valid, right? So you've performed your obligation. The prayer won't be, you know, there's no ibtal there. But the question would be, what's the ruling? Is it makruh to perform your prayer in that situation or not? You'd have to look and see what your marja says. So even the rulings of karaha have to be handed down to us through the muraja. One of the ways to explain what makruh means when it comes to prayer, right, is that the amount of rewards that you would receive for that prayer would be less, right? One of the way to explain karaha when it comes to prayer is that way. It's not that Allah dislikes you praying, right? Because that doesn't make sense. It's that your prayer yields less rewards, right?
Thanks for clarifying that, Sheikhna. Last thing we want is to build a throne in hellfire because of a mistaken fatwa.
We always have to be careful when it comes to that. Let me just check if there's any. No more questions. So Ali, unless you wanted to add anything, shall we move on?
Inshallah.
No. Then inshallah, Sheikhna, you can take our hearts to Karbala, inshallah. Bismillah.
Okay, Bismillah. لا أدري من الذي يدعونه سر الحياة. لا أدري من الذي يدعونه سر الحياة. لا أدري أنا الفرات ترى أم أنت الفرات. يا أبو فاضل يا سيد الماء الذي يجري يوم 10 من المحرم وقف أبا فضل العباس عليه السلام ينظر يمينا ويسارا يذهب إلى أخيه الحسين. Brother يا أبا عبد الله, the voices of the children are breaking my heart, Ya Aba Abdullah. Sukaina cries for water. They cry for me to quench their thirst. Ya Aba Abdullah, allow me to go and quench the thirst of my needs. Ya Abbas, Ya Abbas, what will happen when you leave? عباس وكأني بزينب تنظر إلى أخيها. Abbas, you know what will happen to me when you leave me, your brother. When you leave me, our father, they will behead my brother Hussein. They will cut up my brother Hussein. They will light up the tents, our father. They will make us run from tent to tent. وكأني بالعباس يا زينب سامحيني سامحيني. And it's as if أبو الفضل العباس عليه السلام replies and responds to Zainab عليها السلام سامحيني عالنهار قطعة ويساري ويميني يا زينب لا أدري النهر هل يروى من النهر. السلام عليك يا ابن فضل العباس. السلام عليك يا ساق العطاشا.
صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة وموضع الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة ومهبط الوحي ومعدن الرحمة وخزان العلم ومنتهى الحلم. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك أيها المظلوم. صلى الله عليك أيها الشهيد بكربلاء عطشانا. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, O our dear Imam al-Hussein, our dear oppressed Imam who was slaughtered by the shores of the Furat whilst his mouth was dry from thirst. Tonight we'd like to remember the sacrifice of the brother of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the flag bearer of the army of Aba Abdullah, Qamaru Bani Hashim, Abul Fadl al-Abbas. It is narrated that on the day of Ashura, as many companions had reached the ranks of Shahada, and as the enemies kept advancing, some say that Abul Fadl al-Abbas could not stand this any longer. The reports say that when Abbas sees his brother Imam al-Hussein all alone, he comes to him and says, Ya Mawlai, hal min rukhsa. O my master, do I now have permission to go to the battlefield? Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, on hearing this request, starts crying. فَبَكَى الْحُسَيْنُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا. قال يا أخي أنت صاحب لوائي. Oh my brother, you are the flag bearer of this army. وإذا مضيت تفرك عسكري. And if you are to go, my army will disintegrate, my army will collapse, O Abbas. Perhaps at this moment Abbas looks around and says, "Oh Imam, which army are you now referring to? There is hardly anyone left behind." Abbas says to Imam, "I can't stand this any longer. I want to take revenge on these hypocrites. قَدْ ضَاقَ صَدْرِي وَشَئِمْتُ مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ وأريد أن أطلب ثأري من هؤلاء المنافقين." In the background, the cries of the children could be heard. Al-Atash, Al-Atash. فقال الحسين عليه السلام: إن كان ولا بد فاطلب لهؤلاء الأطفال قليلا من الماء. If you so insist, O Abbas, then go and try and get some water for these little children. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, the one who reminded the enemies of Haydar al-Karrar, carries the water skin on his left and his sword on the right. He reaches the Furat. Abbas bends down and collects some water in his hand. As soon as Abbas sees this water, فذكر عطش الحسين وأهل بيته. He remembers the thirst of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. فرمى الماء على الماء. Abbas throws the water back into the river. وملأ القربة وتوجه نحو الخيمة. As Abbas was making his way back to the tents, one of the cowardly enemies laid in ambush strikes a deadly blow to his right arm, severing the arm of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Abbas shouts out, "Wallah, in qata'tum yamini, inni uhami abadan an dini." You severing my right arm will never stop me from defending my religion. فحمل القربة على كتفه الأيسر. Abbas now holds the water skin in his left hand. فقطعوا عليه الطريق. The enemies blocked off the path for Abbas. وأحاطوا به من كل جانب. They surround him from all directions. Then another mal'oon who laid in ambush strikes a painful blow on the left arm of Abbas. فحمل القربة بأسنانه. Then Abbas holds the water skin between his teeth. Perhaps Abbas is thinking that the children in the tents are anxiously awaiting this water. The reports say then, فَرَشَقُوهُ بِالسِّهَامِ. The enemy started showering Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas with arrows. فَسَهْمٌ أَصَابَ عَيْنِي. Then an arrow pierces the eye of Abbas. فَسَهْمٌ أَصَابَ صَدْرِي. Then one pierces his chest. فَسَهْمٌ أَصَابَ الْقِرْبَانِ. When an arrow strikes the water skin, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas loses all his energy. فَوَقَفَ مُتَحَيِّرًا. Abbas suddenly stops, confused. He was seen moving forward and then moving back. But why? Why was Abbas confused? Perhaps Abbas is thinking, how can I face the children? At this stage, another mal'oon comes from behind and strikes the head of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas with an iron rod. فَانْقَلَبَ عَنْ فَرَسِهِ. Now Abbas falls off from his horse. Brothers and sisters, if you've ever fallen to the ground, instinctively you'd use your hands to break your fall, you'd use your arms to break your fall. But Abbas has no arms, he lands on the ground. Imam Hussein alayhi salam reaches the body of Abbas and cries out, Al-an inkasara dhahri. Now my back has been broken. Imam alayhi salam sits by the body of Abbas. Perhaps Abbas was thinking, looking at his master, Ya Mawla, at least I have someone to come to me in my last moments. But who will be there for you, O Master? Lamma shimrun jalisun ala sadri. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.
لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين. Thank you very much to our dear shuyukh for an interesting discussion tonight. May Allah bless you all. And thank you to Sheikh Muhammad Dahaini and Brother Abbas Virji for the heart-touching masa'ib. May Allah bless you both in this life and the next. The posters we put up for the donations going to the displaced people of Afghanistan during this hard time will be displayed again at the end of tonight's presentation, inshallah. That's it for tonight. We'll see you all tomorrow night, inshallah. Stay safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.